All right. Hey, everybody, this is Bill. Sorry about that. Had a little hiccup on the presentation sharing, but thanks for everyone for joining. Again, today we're going to be walking through an actual ransomware recovery that one of our clients experienced. They installed Quorum just 2 months before they were hit with ransomware. So it was really none too soon to have Quorum in place. They said with previously without Quorum, there would have been a much different story. The client's name's Walter. For reasons you guys might understand, they are hoping to keep the identity of the company discreet. But if you'd like more details about the situation or to talk to the client, they've said they'd be happy to share more about their experience. Unfortunately, they had a medical emergency today, so they're not going to be on the call with us. But if you'd like to talk with them, they said they're more than happy to share their experience and talk with Quorum about not only ransomware recovery, but day-to-day management, how great it's been, or any other type of disasters. So we're sharing a bit of a screen now. It says case study. Again, this ransomware, what ransomware looks like. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can make this slide a little bit bigger and then go to the next one. Perfect. So why Quorum was selected was really in search for more ransomware recovery or fail-safe proof. They had backup in place, which they felt was a good job of protecting their data, but they were concerned if they had a site outage, what would they do for failover, or if ransomware was able to get past their security defenses, what they might do there. So we went through a pretty brief selection process. Again, a lot of it, the criteria was around ransomware restored. So we talked about how Quorum has immutable backups, so that once the backups are taken, they're in a read-only view only, and they can't be edited. So that if someone were to infiltrate your backups, they're not able to delete or change them, and you're not able to have access to them anymore. We also talked about Quorum's virtual air-gapped. So that's where the appliance is virtually air-gapped from the rest of the production environment, which makes it practically invisible to outside forces. As probably many people on the call know, if a hacker identifies the backup location, they kind of put on the blinders to the rest of the environment, focus their energy there, because they know if they can get access to your backups, then they kind of have the keys to the castle. And then finally, all of the data is encrypted while Quorum's taking the backup, and even while the data is at rest. So there's all these different layers of protection to not only keep the backups protected, but make sure that Quorum can act as that fail-safe in the ransomware recovery situation. This person had a highly virtualized environment. Quorum's flexible, so we can work with on-prem physical or virtual servers, or applications hosted in the cloud. This specific client had a request that integrating with VMware specifically. So we talked about Quorum's, how we'd be able to integrate there, and how we have different recovery options depending on what the outage is and how we'd like to go from there. We're able to recover on Quorum's equipment locally, or we can fail over on a server in Quorum's cloud, or we can actually recover directly to some VMware production equipment. So that stuck out to Walter, and he works for a utility provider. So it's just kind of worth noting that, because they have really critical data, but also downtime is even more important to them. And of course, they have some legal ramifications to make sure that they have uptime connectivity and don't lose any data. Moving from there, they previously were working with an MSP who was providing a couple of services to them, but including looking over their backups and DR. A couple of issues that Walter had with this was, one, like most people, the most common use case for Quorum or any other backup product is just recovering individual files on a daily basis. and Walter didn't want to have to reach out to the MSP every time someone, deleted a file or wanted access to a previous version. On top of that, Walter's the ultimate owner of the data for the utility company and ultimately responsible. And so he wanted to have control of his backups. That's a common story that we hear. We're actually going to work with Walter and a service provider in conjunction moving forward, so that either Walter or a service provider can reach out to us, which is great. Just adding that flexibility helps minimize downtime or unnecessary circles, but it also gives the end user that confidence that the backups are being taken, that the backups are good, and that they're going to be there in a recovery situation as well. So moving forward, we can start to talk about after they got Quorum selected and implemented. Again, not a moment too soon, because it was just 2 months after implementation was completed that the ransomware event happened. How the ransomware event was first noticed was Walter saw that there was an unknown user listed in their company directory. And so that kind of initially put on the red flag. He isolated that user. Later that day, they saw that a little bit of data had been deleted. And then a little bit later in that day, they started, the ransomer started sending out demands to the employees. From there, they started to release data online. Apparently that was this particular strategy for this one ransom was to see if there's any takers out there, if anybody's really interested in your data, and that affects how they release it and how much they're going to charge for it. More demands were released, and they said they would start releasing more and more of their data to the public if they didn't pay the ransom. And there's actually a website that this specific malware, where they'll list all the affected companies or end users that they've affected, and kind of put their information out on there. And the attack vector with it that they found out was they had another software that they were using that had an open port, and that was what was abused to get in to their system. So now they identified the attack. Let's talk about what the recovery looked like. One, and I wish Walter was here to talk about this, because it'd be even more powerful, but it made this, I'm sure it was still a bit of a stressful situation. They wanted to make sure it got right, but they felt really confident that they were going to be able to recover. They did talk to our support. A lot of times our support's not needed to do a recovery. It's actually the design of Quorum that's easy enough that any recovery can be done. However, often when our clients are affected with ransomware, often they do reach out to us for the recovery because they're feeling vulnerable and they just want to make sure they get the recovery right. So they had actually zero data loss, which might be the biggest part of the story, zero data loss during this. And they had really minimal downtime. Actually, the only downtime that they experienced was planned downtime. They had about a week where they left the server dormant, the one that had been primarily affected. And the reason they wanted to do that was just to feel extra confident that they had extinguished the issue and it wouldn't let the hacker back in. So they could have been back up and running even faster than that, but they chose to leave one application, the one that had been the attack vector, down for a week, just to make sure that they had isolated the event and that wouldn't happen again. But zero data loss. Support was really helpful. And at the bottom here is a quote from Walter. It says that Quorum pretty much saved their company. I can't tell you what their company is worth, but I can tell you that it's worth much more than what we paid for Quorum. Kind of a funny line there, but Quorum is pretty affordable. And right here, it just kind of saved the bacon for this utility provider. Otherwise, they said there would have been no recovery, complete data loss, or they'd have been forced to pay the ransom, which they didn't want to do. Online, I have Gabriel, who's our VP of technology, and he helps oversee our service team and support team. And I know he was pretty close to the story. Gabe, is there anything that you wanted to add on Walter's recovery?
Yeah, just to kind of chime in, he worked with, over a couple of day period, several different engineers on our team, mostly because when he called in initially and we got the servers up and running, that all went very smooth. He talked to our first level support guy who helped him out. And then he had just other questions and concerns and wanted to test different scenarios and test different servers, which is why he took a week to bring that server back up. Is he used our test environment quite extensively to kind of go through various things, and kept calling in with a question about this or a question about that. And at one point, on his Exchange server, which he had recovered and was running on the OnQ, he actually applied an update that caused a problem, and he called us for help, and we were able to help him get the server back up and running, with really no problem at all. So he had an extra event that even happened during the course of this. So it was an interesting case study from our side, from the support side, because I went to the support guys, and every time we have an event, we kind of do a deep dive onto what happened, how did we do, what could we do different, those type of things. And it was interesting that he had kind of parallel events that happened, that could have made it even worse if he didn't have kind of our support team there to help him out. So it was really an interesting thing to hear that he made it through and had no issues, which was what we expect and what happened. But his enthusiasm about getting back up and running was just great. Everybody that worked with him loved talking to him.
That's amazing. Yeah, he's been great. And again, if you'd like to speak with him after the call to hear more about the story or to verify his experience, Walter be more than happy to speak to anybody and recommend Quorum. And just to further on what Gabe's talking, I think Gabe was going to go ahead and maybe show us what that recovery would look like now from the interface. But he brought up a really good point that maybe you can highlight, is that once Quorum fails over, it'll actually begin protecting that node. So if there's another event that would happen while you're failed over, there's still an additional layer there for protection to prevent data loss and downtime. And while we're going through this presentation, if you have any questions on Walter's story or the recovery that Gabe's showing, there's a chat option on the right. Feel free to drop any questions, and we'll use the last couple minutes to check any of those off.
Okay, there we go. Can you see my screen, Bill? Everyone can see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So what I want to show you guys is how easy it is to recover with the OnQ. And I'm going to actually show you two different methods that we have for recovery that can actually work at the same time if extreme situations need it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our agent-based backup and recovery, which is what Walter used. He had some physical machines in his environment, and that's actually what he used to recover. And so what we do is we basically just turn that machine on by clicking that button and turn that on in the production network. So we would say the production network, and we went back to a point in time before his outage. So as you can see here, I have all the way back to August 6th in my repository here that I can instantly start any version of these servers from any of these points in time. And so we would just pick the point in time we want and say start in production. And that was really the only two steps he had to go through to bring those servers up, which is why his first call with us only lasted for 10 minutes. We brought those servers up, got him onto the network, got his domain up and running, his Exchange server up and running, and he was, ready to go. The other way we have to recover is with VIP, which is our new feature. And with VIP recovery, you actually have the ability to recover directly back to a VMware host. So you can either recover to the OnQ hardware, or if you want to really get right back to your physical hardware because you were infected with ransomware and the host is okay, it was just the VM that was affected, you literally just pick your host, type in your username and password, and again, pick which snapshot you want to recover. It will mount those disks up to your VM host. It starts up that server, has the same IPs, same everything, brings it up, and you're back up and running from that point in time. And then you can use vMotion to move it back in without ever taking it back down. So two really easy ways to recover, and we've made it, as you can see from what I just showed you, really simple that anyone can do those 3 clicks and be up and running. And that's what we did with Walter when he was on the phone with us. Is we just walk him through this process, give him that peace of mind, and he's up and running. So it's that simple.
And they used the vMotion. That's why they had zero downtime in this case. Is that correct?
They didn't use the vMotion. They actually had some physical servers, so they used the agent-based recovery. So they started it up on the OnQ hardware and ran from us. And then when they got to a point where they were sure they cleaned up the hardware that they had, they used bare metal recovery features to bring it back into production.
That's
Good
awesome.
question.
And what are some other things that people need to be aware of during a ransomware recovery that might be different from a different disaster recovery?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I mean, in his case, they attacked through RDP. He had one of his terminal servers set up so you could access it from the internet, and that's how someone got into his account. So there's lots of ways that they can come in, which is why he wanted to take extra precautions to make sure he had secured that. But once they're in your environment and once you're infected, your last means of recovery is with a disaster recovery product like Quorum. And so being able to set up your environment and protect yourself in that way is very, very critical. The other part is you want to make it dead simple. The last thing you want in a disaster scenario when you have a million things going through your mind is complexity. And so we take a lot of that complexity out of that process. Ransomware in general is affecting around 60% of companies so far. And that number just grows and grows. The complexity of ransomware just grows and grows. And so being able to recover from that event that will eventually happen to you is critical. And so that is really kind of the message that I would relay out to you is no matter what protections you have on which layers, right from the edge of your network with your firewall, your intrusion protection service, your IDS, IPS, your antivirus, your endpoint protection, all of these things eventually will break down. So having a recovery method is critical.
I was thinking the exact same thing. The layers are really important, from security to training to having a fail-safe in a recovery solution, all the way to having a good cyber liability insurance policy. They all play a factor there. And unfortunately, I guess Walter's not the only client we've had to help out of ransomware. How does his experience or story compared to those other clients we've helped recover from ransomware in the past year or so?
It's pretty similar. It's pretty similar. Any customer that we've had that's let us know that they've had ransomware, this method of recovery is pretty straightforward and simple to use and implement. And so we haven't lost a customer to ransomware yet. Knock on wood, we're 100% successful at getting them back up and running. So that's an important thing that we kind of pride ourselves on. Our immutable backups and our ease of recovery is critical to our services.
That's really powerful. My floods, power outages, network outages, none of those disasters have gone away, but it seems like the disaster everyone wants to make sure that they can recover from today is ransomware. And like you said, it's it's getting through to people. So it's good to have the fail protection in place. Just a few minutes left. If there's anyone left on the call, or if there's anyone on the call who has any questions, feel free to chat them through. I know we have a mix of current clients who wanted to hear about the process of recovering. We've got some people getting ready to sign up as Quorum clients, and then there's some people who may not be that familiar with Quorum. So if there's any questions that we can answer with the last few minutes, just chat them in the question bar. Other than that, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining on. There's a lot of people online here, so if you would like a one-on-one conversation with a sales engineer to talk more about ransom recovery, immutable backups, the virtual air gaps or encryption, the pieces that Quorum's put in place to make sure that we're staying protected and that we are that fail safe, or if you'd like to learn more about the backup and disaster recovery solution of Quorum, just let us know. We'll shoot an email and a call follow-up to everyone. But if you'd like to set up a meeting to learn more, just let us know.
So there's quite a few questions that have come in. I'm just going to kind of punch my way through them here with you guys. One of them was that I thought was a great question was, how do you know which backup version, which version to recover from the list that I had? There's a couple of ways to know. And the beauty is, if you're not sure, you can bring them up in the test network, which is an isolated environment, to see if it's infected. But what most of the ransomware companies, criminals use, is they put a text file on the root of the C drive of an infected machine, really to let you know who to contact and what to do. And so that is the key thing. That create date really gives you an idea of when it infected your machine or when it got there. And so going to before that date or being near that date helps you to real dial in when you were infected. And because all of these are instantly bootable, it doesn't take long to come in and see which ones have the infection and which don't. There's a little bit of forensics that happens when you bring it up in the test network that you can go through to see if the files that the ransomware people use are on the machine at that point. But it's pretty straightforward process because they want it to be. They want you to know how long they've been in your environment. One of the other questions he asks, and I don't have a great answer for this, is how did Walter deal with the data being exposed? I don't have a really good answer. I know it was a very small subset of his environment that was exposed to the internet. But I'm pretty sure that typically in that kind of scenario, and not speaking for Walter because I don't know how his group handled that, but typically that's where you would engage your cybersecurity and your insurance providers to help you deal with that. There's public relations policies. There's, if you fall under HIPAA or PCI compliance rules, there's notifications and type of things you have to do if that specific data had end user data, credit card data, or anything like that. So there's processes that you would follow in those scenarios, depending on the scenario and what the data was. Let's see, mentioned looking for a ransom note. Yes, there's totally the risk of being there before the ransom note was created. What that helps you do is dial in about when it was started. It's not an exact science, but that also tells you who the ransomware creator was, so that you can find out which files that ransomware actually uses, so you can then find where they are on the machine, when they got on the machine, and when they're not there. And you can use the file level recovery to see when we backed them up the first time and that kind of stuff to really dial it in. So there's lots of ways we can help to find which snapshot is not infected and get you where you need to be.
And there was a question on the utility company and Walter's kind of company size environment. They're about 500 employees. They have about 12 servers and about 14 terabytes worth of data. And they were, someone asked, well, what protection of Quorum do they have? They had a local Quorum appliance, and they were also replicating the Quorum's private cloud.
Right. And from the time that he was infected, I don't know how long he waited before he called us, but from the time he talked to us, it was only a few minutes to boot up the machines. So the time it takes to boot was the recovery time. In our world, it's just the time it took him to make the decision to recover. It could have taken a couple of hours. And just kind of going through the list of questions to make sure I've addressed them all. One of the questions that came in is, was he on an appliance or in the cloud? He had both. He had an appliance locally and was replicating to the cloud, but his actual recovery strategy, because the ransomware was local, was just to the appliance that was there. He didn't have to recover to the cloud instance. But that is available to you. In fact, if he had recovered to the cloud instance, if he just had no faith in what his infrastructure was at that point and wanted to rebuild everything, he could have done that, run the company from the cloud while he recovered. We would have seeded a new appliance for him and shipped it back to him so that he could then do local data recovery as he saw fit to bring himself back up. So there's strategies we can use there to help you recover from the cloud as well.
All that's really important as well, because the appliance, we already talked about how the appliance, compared to some software only backup solutions, provides a lot of layers of protection, but also having that appliance gives you resources to fail over. So generally we scope the appliance to recover a subset of the client's environment in case they lose a virtual host or one physical server. They can do that recovery. And then we usually scope out the disaster recovery as a service for Quorum's private cloud to support their entire environment, so that if there was a ransomware or an other event that made the production site unavailable, they'd be able to fail over from Quorum's to Quorum's private cloud and run there indefinitely. There's no meter or time. There's no additional cost to doing that. That's the service that Quorum provides. And so just being able to fail over locally or on the cloud and know that you're going to have production speeds for as long as you need it is really helpful during this ransomware event. But we also have many clients struggling with the chip shortage or supply chain issues. So knowing when you might be able to get replacement hardware right now is kind of an unknown or a challenge. So even more valuable to be able to fail over, whether that's locally or in the cloud, and know you can run there for an undefined period of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the questions that came in is there a certain size company our solution could not handle? Well, I'm pretty sure someone the size of maybe Wells Fargo would be a little tough for us to bite off. But I would say most any company, that's not a Fortune 100 would be fine. 1 to hundreds of servers, we're totally comfortable of managing and helping our customers with.
Yep.
How much time do we have left here, Bill?
We're about 5 minutes over, so we can wrap it up now. Just want to thank everybody for their great questions. Some of these were from prospects. Some are actually notes from current customers saying, "Hey, don't forget to mention this," because I know Steve online has used us to recover from ransomware himself. So maybe in a future webinar series, we'll tag Steven to tell his story and how he recovered.
For sure.
Yeah, if you think of any more questions, again, we'll follow up after the webinar. You can do it email, or we can get on a call, whatever easiest for you. Thanks to everyone for your time today, and Gabriel, thanks for running us through the presentation. Much appreciated.
Thank you guys. Take care.